They say a mother's love can move mountains, weather storms, and challenge any limit. But what happens when that love is crushed by injustice? When the pain of an irreparable loss turns what should be strength into something even more powerful, a thirst for justice. Marianne Bachmeier was not just a mother. She was the embodiment of a woman who had lost everything and decided to fight in a way no one could have predicted. Her act wasn't just desperate, it was shocking, visceral, and forever changed the perception of what it means to seek justice. Today, you'll hear the story of a mother who faced the system, broke all the rules, and made the most drastic decision of her life, a decision that divided the entire world but, for her, was an act of unquestionable love. Prepare yourself to relive a story that challenges everything you believe about right and wrong, justice and vengeance. What you're about to hear is not just a criminal case, it is a tale of courage, pain, and a mother's unshakable love. Marianne Bachmeier lived for her daughter, Anna. In their modest home, every corner seemed to echo the love she poured into raising the girl. Alone, Marianne had dedicated herself to building a safe and welcoming home, where Anna's smile was her greatest treasure. Anna was 7 years old and radiated an energy that lit up every room. Her presence transformed any space. She ran through the garden, exploring every detail of the flowers her mother tended so lovingly, as if discovering the world in small pieces. Her natural curiosity seemed endless, always looking at Marianne with bright eyes as though her mother were the center of her universe. Their days were filled with simple routines, yet they brimmed with meaning. Marianne woke early, prepared breakfast, and watched Anna as she struggled to improve on her violin. The music, even filled with off-key notes, brought life to the house. In the afternoons, the two spent hours in the garden, where Marianne focused on her plants while Anna made up games. In the evening, the house was bathed in a serenity that calmed even Marianne's most anxious thoughts. Behind these peaceful moments, there was a constant worry. Marianne knew the outside world could be cruel. She did everything she could to keep Anna safe, but the fear that something might pierce their bubble of security always lingered in her mind. This fear, though hidden behind smiles and hugs, was a shadow Marianne silently carried. Still, the bond between mother and daughter seemed unbreakable. It was a love that filled every space, making their daily lives a testament to the idea that happiness could be found in the simplest things. That day began as usual. Marianne prepared breakfast while Anna got dressed for school. The routine flowed unhurriedly, like so many other times. As Marianne went about her chores, she watched Anna leave through the front door. The sound of the girl's light footsteps echoing on the sidewalk was something her mother always noticed, though she never imagined it would be the last time she'd hear them. By late afternoon, the silence became unbearable. Anna, who always returned home at the same time, did not appear. Marianne waited, looking out the window with her heart racing. Time seemed to slow as the sun sank slowly on the horizon. When night fell and Anna still hadn't come back, panic set in. Marianne began calling neighbors, asking if anyone had seen her. No one had answers. The darkness of the night seemed to amplify her despair. She went out onto the streets, calling her daughter's name, but every corner she turned brought only the echo of her own voice. The police were called, and the start of the search brought fragile hope. Officers searched the area, speaking with residents and organizing groups to comb through the surroundings. Marianne watched silently, a mix of fear and helplessness etched on her face. Time seemed to work against her, and every passing minute made Anna's return less likely. The following morning, the news arrived. Anna's body had been found, discarded as if it were nothing. The confirmation struck Marianne like a blow, ripping away any semblance of normality that remained. The pain was so intense it felt like a black hole, consuming everything around her. The suspect's identity was quickly uncovered: Klaus Grabowski, a man with a history of heinous crimes. He had kidnapped Anna and committed atrocities beyond human comprehension before taking her life. Marianne didn't know what to feel. There was anger, pain, and an overwhelming sense that the world would never be the same. What was once a home full of life was now shrouded in a disturbing silence. Marianne could think of nothing but Anna. Something inside her began to change, driven by a dangerous mix of love and despair. The details of the crime were hard to process. Klaus Grabowski, the man who had taken Anna from Marianne, had a deeply troubling history. He was a convicted pedophile who, despite his criminal record, was free. The system had failed by allowing him to continue living among innocent people like Anna. Grabowski was an ordinary-looking man, which made him all the more dangerous. He had used his past experience to lure Anna, exploiting her innocence and trust. The crime was meticulously planned. He had kept Anna captive for hours before taking her life. Details from the investigation revealed a cold and calculated behavior, which only deepened Marianne's indignation and outrage. What made it all the more unbearable was knowing that Grabowski should never have been free. He had previously been convicted of similar crimes, but his release was secured after he agreed to chemical castration. However, the treatment was discontinued, and he continued to pose a threat. This fact made Marianne question how the system could have been so negligent. The police found Anna in an abandoned lot, a place seemingly chosen to symbolize utter disregard for her life. The location was grim, with the air heavy with the smell of dampness and neglect. To Marianne, it reflected what Grabowski had done, treated her daughter as something disposable. The days that followed were filled with pain and indignation. Marianne couldn't escape the images that filled her mind. Every detail shared by the police seemed to fuel a growing anger within her. It was as if the weight of losing Anna was transforming into something else, an almost visceral need for justice. As the case progressed, news of Grabowski's trial began to spread. He would be brought to court to answer for his crimes. Marianne, however, saw no hope in it. The same system that had let him go free once could fail again. The courtroom would be the stage where Grabowski faced justice, but for Marianne, that space increasingly became a symbol of broken promises. Something within her began to shift, as if she were preparing for the inevitable. Marianne sat silently during the court sessions, but inside her, the turmoil was relentless. The trial of Klaus Grabowski had begun, and the courtroom was filled with people eager to witness the case unfold. Marianne, however, wasn't looking for curiosity or spectacle. What she wanted was justice. Day after day, she listened to the defense lawyers try to humanize Grabowski, arguing that he was a product of his upbringing, and that his history of abuse somehow justified his monstrous acts. Every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into Marianne. Nothing, she thought, could justify what he had done to Anna. The judicial system that was supposed to protect her seemed fragile once again. It was impossible to ignore the possibility that Grabowski might escape severe punishment. Justice seemed to move cautiously, as if trying to balance the fate of a man who had taken an innocent life. But for Marianne, this was an outrage. Anna hadn't been given that chance. Grabowski's behavior during the trial was especially infuriating. He seemed indifferent, as if completely detached from the suffering he had caused. Marianne watched his cold and impassive expressions, and it fed something dark within her. The time she spent in court was marked by memories of Anna. Every argument from the defense, every legal technicality used to lessen Grabowski's responsibility, seemed to dehumanize her daughter further. Marianne felt that the courtroom was not a place to honor Anna's memory but rather a stage for legal manipulations that ignored the weight of a mother's loss. As the trial progressed, Marianne began to realize that the justice she sought might never come. Grabowski, even if convicted, would never face the pain he had caused. This thought began to take shape in her mind, and the void left by Anna seemed to be filled with a decision she never imagined she would make. In the silence of the courtroom, within walls that echoed legal debates, something changed inside Marianne. She ceased to be just a grieving mother. She was becoming something else, someone driven by a force that defied the very system that had disappointed her so many times. It was the last day of the trial. The courtroom was packed, filled with people eager to hear the verdict. Marianne, sitting in a corner of the room, observed every detail. The sounds around her, whispers, hurried footsteps, papers rustling, seemed distant. For her, everything that mattered was centered on one man, Klaus Grabowski. He was there, just a few meters away, sitting with the same indifferent posture he had shown throughout the trial. Marianne never took her eyes off him. Every movement, every vacant look, fueled the pain that seemed to consume her soul. She had come to court that day with a clear purpose, something that had been growing inside her since the moment Anna's body was found. The judge began to speak, explaining the procedure before announcing the sentence. Marianne barely heard the words. Her attention was fixed on the bag resting on her lap, where she hid the gun she had obtained days earlier. It was an impulsive decision, but for her, it seemed like the only option. The final arguments were presented, and silence filled the room as everyone awaited the verdict. Marianne knew that any sentence would be insufficient. No punishment could be proportionate to the loss she had suffered. The system, she thought, would never truly understand or deliver real justice. Then, the moment came. As the judge read the sentence, Marianne felt a heat rise through her body. It was as if all the suppressed emotions, pain, anger, frustration, had transformed into an uncontrollable impulse. She stood up. Before anyone could react, Marianne pulled the gun from her bag and pointed it at Grabowski. The room was filled with the sound of gunshots, one after the other, echoing almost deafeningly. Grabowski fell from his chair, and chaos ensued. People screamed, ran, and tried to make sense of what had happened. Marianne remained motionless for a moment, holding the gun firmly. Her expression wasn't one of triumph but something more complex. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, only to be replaced by another, different one. She knew the act wouldn't bring Anna back. She knew she would face the consequences. But, at that moment, she felt she had done what needed to be done. When the police surrounded her, she handed over the gun without resistance. The courtroom, which had once seemed like a place of injustice and helplessness, was now the stage for something the world would never forget. Marianne Bachmeier, the mother who had lost everything, had just done the unthinkable. Marianne's act was like a cry of despair that echoed around the world. In no time, newspapers, radios, and televisions were telling her story, turning her into a symbol of courage and determination. The courtroom, once the stage of her pain, was now seen as the place where a mother took justice into her own hands. In prison, Marianne's life changed again. She began to receive letters of support from people who saw her as an extraordinary figure. They were mothers, fathers, and even strangers who recognized in her act something beyond despair, a kind of love that knew no bounds. Even so, Marianne remained reserved. Her goal was never to be an example but to honor Anna's memory in the only way she knew. Meanwhile, society debated the meaning of her actions. To many, she had exposed the flaws of a judicial system incapable of protecting the most vulnerable. Her act was not just vengeance but a challenge to structures that so often ignored the victims. Marianne became an inspiration for debates and movements demanding changes to laws and harsher punishments for heinous crimes. When her sentence was announced, many felt relief. Marianne accepted her punishment with the same determination she had faced everything with up to that point. During her time in prison, she transformed her pain into strength, a strength that continued to inspire those who knew her story. Upon leaving prison, Marianne did not seek recognition. For her, freedom was another chance to honor her daughter. Though she carried the pain of loss, she also carried the certainty that her act had left an indelible mark on the world. Marianne Bachmeier became a name that transcended borders and eras. Her story wasn't just about a grieving mother but about someone who challenged the idea of conventional justice in the name of something greater, the love for her daughter. The world never forgot the day she took destiny into her own hands, turning her pain into an act that shook systems and inspired debates about morality and vengeance. Over the years, Marianne became associated with the fight for change. She brought to light discussions about the fallibility of the judicial system and the need to protect vulnerable victims. Activist groups used her story as an example that justice must go beyond cold words and sentences. But Marianne's legacy went beyond institutions. It lived on in the collective memory of everyone who heard her story. Many saw in her the image of a mother who went to the limit to honor her daughter's life. Her act, though controversial, became a symbol of love that knew no bounds, even in the face of the greatest adversities. Marianne spent her remaining years in relative anonymity, away from public attention. However, the impact of her decision never diminished. She carried with her the pain of loss but also the certainty that she had fulfilled her promise to protect Anna's memory. The case of Marianne Bachmeier remains one of the most emblematic in contemporary history. It not only revealed the flaws of a system but also showed just how far a mother's love can go. Her name, even decades later, still resonates as a reminder that sometimes the most desperate acts leave the deepest marks.